All right, here we go. Today we have Corey Pegues, who started out as a member of the infamous Supreme Team, one of the largest and most violent drug dealing crews in New York during the 80s, who hid that part of his life and went on to joining the NYPD and becoming a cop until his career got derailed after he started speaking out against racism in the police department. He has a new documentary out right now called The Cops and Robbers Story, which we're going to talk about in depth. Corey, welcome to Vlad TV.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Was your first time here? I want to start in the very beginning. So you grew up in Queens?
Yeah, Queens, Jamaica, Queens.
Okay. So what was Queens like in the 70s and 80s?
Yo, let me tell you, man. Queens, it's a middle-class neighborhood. No, commercial strips. It was just, fun. Double Dutch, Skelly, playing basketball in the park, handball. It was all good until the crack era hit about 84, 85. And things started getting a little different. But we grew up good. Family-oriented, single-family homes, 2 rooms, a basement, backyard. It was a nice neighborhood.
Okay. And growing up, you never wanted to be a cop?
Never wanted to be a cop. But what's funny, when we were young, you play cops and robbers. We always played the cops and robbers, but I never really had aspirations on being a police officer.
Okay. So initially, you were just generally a good kid. You were going to school, you were playing basketball, and you were actually pretty good on the basketball side of things.
Yeah, I was nice.
Yep. And then a situation happened during one of your games.
Yeah, situation. When I was in high school, I played for Newtown High School. So, I was from another part of Queens called Jamaica, Queens. Newtown High School was in Elmhurst, Queens. I had took a special aptitude test for an engineering program and got accepted. I wanted to get away from my friends because, we were selling drugs, robbing people, and doing all of these crazy things. So I was able to get to Newtown, played on the basketball team. And one day I invited my friends to come to the game. And they came to the game while I'm playing. After the game, I was in the shower getting dressed in the locker room. Somebody came in and said, yo, your friends are out there. They robbing people. They robbed some people. They cut a few people. But, this is my homies, man. It is what it is. But I ended up getting kicked out of the school because I invited my friends. And what happened was these girls and these guys was talking about me, what they was going to do to me. They didn't know I had, my whole mob from the other side of town there. And it ended up being a really bad night for me.
Okay. And was anyone actually charged with anything, or is it just a bunch of chaos and everyone went their separate ways?
Bunch of chaos. You got to talk about, this is 85, 86. Policing was more of a reactive department. Something happens, we show up, they try to investigate, but they really wasn't really trying to really investigate things at that time. The main issue for the principal was just kicking me out of the damn school.
Okay. And after that happened, is that when your life kind of took a different turn?
Yeah, it definitely took a different turn. See, I tried, Vlad. I tried to change my life, go to a good school. I was trying to actually live 2 lives. I would be selling drugs all day, all night with my friends, and then go to school. This school where nobody knew me. I could just really be Corey. I didn't have to live this street life of Boo life, my street names. And but once that game happened, things changed. And then they sent me to the most violent school in Queens, if not New York City, Andrew Jackson High School.
Okay. And around that time, the Supreme Team was really making a big name for itself.
Yeah, Supreme was big.
Okay. So how did you get affiliated with Supreme Team?
Well, I got affiliated with Supreme Team because one of his top lieutenant, if not the top lieutenant, his name is Bimmy. Bimmy's my man. It's funny because a lot of people think Bimmy's from Southside Queens. He's not. He's from my side of town, which we call the north side of Queens. He's actually from Farmers Boulevard, grew up down, maybe 2 or 3 blocks from LL Cool J on that side of town. So I knew Bimmy from growing up playing ball. Bimmy was really nice with basketball too. So that's why I know him from growing up. And he knew that I was in the streets selling drugs. I had my little crew. My man, Du, Ren, June, 40, it was 4 or 5 of us that was selling drugs. And he knew we was getting it, but he was like, yo, come across town, man. We really getting it over here. Supreme Team was a really big conglomerate. And so I had got into a situation one time. I had a fight with 3 or 4 guys that kind of jumped me. I called my brother-in-law. He came, he stabbed 3 of them in the head. And so I just got low for 30 days on the south side of Queens at my Aunt Belle's house. And while I was over there, I was like, fuck it, I'm here. I might as well get with the team. So I called him and was like, yo, I'm here, man. Let's get it. And that's how I got down with the Supreme team.
Okay, and the Supreme team was started by Kenneth Supreme McGriff and his nephew, Gerald Prince Miller. They started out as teenagers, and I guess they were affiliated with the 5% Nation initially?
Yes. Yeah, they all have 5% in names.
Right, exactly. So they started to build up, and at one point, I guess McGriff got sent to prison for 10 years, and that's when Prince took over?
Yeah, when he was in jail, Prince took over the team.
Okay, and it was really run like a real corporation. Like there was just different levels, there was different like ways of doing business. People were basically put in teams, and I guess they were making about $200,000 a day at their height.
Yeah, we was making money hand over fist. But you bring out a good point, because people always ask me, what's the first job you have? I tell them it was the Supreme team, and I'm going to tell you why. So I had to work a shift. You know, we had 3 shifts, 8 to 4 in the afternoon, 4 to midnight, and then midnight to 8 in the morning. And we got paid on Fridays. You know, usually in the drug game, you get like $20 off every 100 pack. It didn't work like that with the Supreme team. You had a straight salary. You know, it was a well-run machine. You had, you know, Supreme, then you had like your Bimmy, you know, Black Just, those lieutenants, and under them, you had some enforcers, and then you had the street sellers like myself. So it was a well-run machine, and you couldn't do anything without getting word from the top.
Right, but the violence was extreme. They're saying in 87 alone, Prince and Supreme, who was in jail at the time, they're saying ordered at least 8 murders during that time.
Yeah, at that time, it was very violent. You know, it's funny, like people always say like the Supreme team, but you got to understand, New York City was very violent. There was drug conglomerates all over. And just in the little place of Queens, you know, we had Corleys, you had the Furtado brothers, we had, you know, Tommy Montana. So, but, you know, Supreme gets the light on him, I guess, because he was very, you know, charismatic. Everybody knew him. He was affiliated with the hip hop game and everything. But it was violent all over in New York City, period.
Right. Okay. So you guys are essentially working for Supreme at this point, part of the Supreme team. You guys are selling drugs and making money. But with that game comes the jealousy, the friction, and so forth. And there was a guy you got into it named Bourne, I guess.
Which Bourne? So there was different Bournes.
The guy that ended up hitting you with the gun.
Guy that ended up giving me the gun?
No. I'm sorry. The guy that ended up hitting you with the gun. What was his name?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so you must have read my book, Bourne, right? Yeah, so there was some alias in the book. That wasn't really his name, but we'll go with that. Yeah, so one day, you know, actually, I can remember the date. It was the day my son was born, December 12th, 1986. My son was born, and I came right from the hospital, went down to the block, and he came up on me. I'm thinking he coming to congratulate me because everybody knew that I was at the hospital with my baby, and he pulled the pistol out, and with a striking glance, swung the gun at me and hit me in the face with the gun. And I was like, wow. And I wasn't strapped, so there's nothing I could do but to get low. And I went home, and like everybody was coming to my crib like, yo, we got to get this. What you going to do? And so, you know, Vlad, in the streets, all you have is street cred. You have to do these things yourself. It would have been easy for me to pay somebody to knock him off, but I decided like I was going to kill him myself. And so I took like 3 days. I kissed my kid. You know, I was like 18. I had 2 babies at the time. I told my mother, you know, I ain't tell nobody that what I was going to do. And I just went down on the block with my 25, nickel-plated 25 to kill him.
Okay. So you went and got your gun, and not only did you want to kill him, but you wanted to do it so everyone saw it because your feelings were so hurt at this point and your reputation was on the line that not only did you want to do a murder, but a public murder at that. And I guess your plan at the time was, well, after I kill him in front of everyone, I'll get about 5 years and I'll come home.
Yo, that's crazy. That's to the letter of what I was thinking. I was like, because street cred. You know, like after God and your family in the streets is street cred. So I was like, I got to make a splash with this. So I'm going to murder him. And I said, listen, I'm going to do this about 6 o'clock because 6 o'clock is prime time. Kids are out of school. Old ladies are coming off the bus. I'm going to kill him in front of everybody. And I was like, I'm going to do like 5-6 year bid. And it's going to work out. But I'm glad that my plan didn't work totally according to plan. It almost did, but I had a little mishap.
Well, you walked up to him, you pulled out your gun, and what happens next?
I pull out the gun. I walk right up to him. And as soon as I got down there, he ran up on me like, yo, I told you, yo, didn't I tell you not to come on the block? I pulled the gun out, put it in his chest, pull the trigger, the gun jammed. I pull it again, it jams. He proceeds to go in his pocket, pull out a 38 and start chasing me and start busting at me on the street. But I'm zigzagging. You know, we learned that in the streets. And my man AJ came around the corner and he had a Uzi and start busting at him. He ran into my other man, my man Ren house. He ran into my man Ren house, and Ren mother came to the door and was like, Booby, please don't do this at my house, please. So we kind of gave him a pass with that.
Okay. I mean, in retrospect, when you look at this situation, thinking you're going to kill someone in broad daylight in front of a crowd of people and, over basically a drug deal, thinking you're going to get 5 years, when the reality was probably life in prison, or maybe 30, 40 years at that level. How'd you come up with that whole 5-year number?
I did. Listen, you gotta understand, I didn't really know the criminal justice system. I didn't know how it worked. We was just young kids. We was just out there in the street. I know if you kill somebody or you shoot them, you go into jail. And you gotta understand that I've seen many people go to jail and come home after a few years for shooting people. This particular person who I pulled the gun out, he just shot a female cop in the chest. Maybe a couple of years ago, he did a little stretch. It was him and a couple of people. So, to me, the numbers, I didn't know nobody was doing life. People was going to jail. It was a revolving door. So I figured I was going to pass through that door myself. But in hindsight, if I would have been knowledgeable about what the criminal justice system is, especially during the Rockefeller days, law days, I would have probably still been in prison.
Right. So you try to kill him. He fires back, misses you, but you guys are all living in the same neighborhood. Does he know like where your mother lives and everything else like that?
Yeah, we played Little League baseball together. He knew my whole family. I knew his mother. It's funny you said it. I just saw his mother at a funeral maybe 3 weeks ago for a mutual friend. And listen, it is what it is. So what was happening back then, it was, again, the street cred. So he knew that I wasn't no punk. He wasn't just going to punk me anymore. So he knew, like, if he came at me, I was going to be prepared. From that moment on, I never left my gun home. I carried my gun with me every single day. Because after the gun jam, I took it to my man, and my man just slid the rack. Because, Vlad, we didn't even know what we was doing. We was young kids. I didn't even know you had to slide the rack to chamber a bullet. I had just brought the gun for 3 vials of crack from a crackhead maybe a few weeks later. I didn't know that I had to slide the rack to chamber a round to pull it. But if I would have knew that, I would have killed him. Because my man was like, yo, you got to slide the rack to chamber a round.
Okay, but now the beef is on. You try to kill him. He fired back. And I assume over this whole incident, no cops arrested anyone or anything else like that. It was just like no one saw nothing, pretty much.
No police at all. No police. Wow. The police really wasn't really out there at that time. They really wasn't out there. And when I was working for the Supreme team, there was a situation where I got caught with a re-up. I got caught with like 300 vials of crack. And the police in a blue and white car, they came up to me, took the crack, looked in the bag, threw it back at me and told me, yo, tell your boss I did him a favor. So I run to my man house, my boss house, like, yo, I just got caught by the police. He was like, yo, get back out there. You don't know we paying them off. I found out we was paying them like $15,000 a week. I didn't even know. Remember, I was like a young kid, grew up on welfare. I really was selling drugs to get like sneakers, money, clothes, girls. That's what it was. I wasn't trying to be a killer. It wasn't like that. I was just trying to stay fresh. And which a lot of us, that's what we was trying to do. But when you get caught up in the game, things happen.
Well, now you have a beef with this guy. You try to kill him. He shot back. And now, is he looking for you for revenge? Or, I mean, you're whether he is or he isn't, I mean, obviously this is now in the air and your life is no longer as safe as it was a couple of weeks ago.
Exactly. So, but then I still got to get money. So I got to get back on the block. And the tension was there. We had some people mediating also. You know what I'm saying? There was some people that was mediating, like, no harm, no foul. Just let this go. And I always knew, like, in the back of his mind, because he was dangerous and people was really scared of this dude. He had shot a cop. He did a few bids. But once I pulled that gun out on him, it was like, yo, life ain't playing. I wasn't playing with him. So it was like, if you come at me, I'm dropping you.
Okay, what ultimately happened to him?
Ultimately, yeah, he just been bitten. That was been his life. He's been bitten. He in jail right now. I mean, but he been bitten his whole life. That was just his thing.
You know, years later, did you ever run into him again or anything of that sort?
Yeah, I ran into him. He came home and he was doing like some construction stuff. I saw him on the construction site, chopped it up, got out, gave him the soul clap and a hug. You gotta remember, we was kids when this thing happened. It's over. As a matter of fact, I spoke to him, I want to say like 2 years ago. I was with my man June and he called him from the feds. And June was like, yo, this such and such on the phone. And I was like, what? Got on the phone, said, yo, what up, man? How you doing? Everything good? How's the family? So we was babies, man. That was like 30 years ago. Like some people hold grudges till they die. Like I can't do that. But I'm always gonna have my eye on the prize. If I ever see him physically, I'm gonna be prepared. Cause you never know.
Right. So you have this situation occur. Your friends who you're hustling with, some of them become addicts themselves. They start using. They start getting locked up as well for dealing. So this whole world is really starting to cave in on you. And you decide to just join the military and get out.
Yeah, Vlad, you understand. Like, again, it was just me and a few friends who we grew up with. We started selling weed, then mescaline tabs, then loose cocaine. And then when crack came, it started getting dangerous. We didn't even have guns when we were selling the weed and loose cocaine and stuff, right? And then it wasn't fun no more. It was fun. It didn't become fun anymore because everybody was getting picked off. Everybody was getting locked up except for me. I even had one situation where the cops came on the block and we all ran into the store. Probably had 100 vials of crack on me. I threw it in like the potato chip rack, put my hands up. It was 3 of us. We all threw our work in the bags and ice cream machine. And they grabbed my man Ren because he did a direct sale. We didn't know. He did a direct sale. So they wasn't even looking for us. They was looking for him. And I was like, damn, I skated again. Needless to say, I grabbed Ren's work, made some more money off his work.
Okay. So you decide to join the military.
Yeah.
And I guess 2 weeks after you joined, that's when the feds came through and just busted the whole Supreme team?
2 weeks later, by the grace of God, 2 weeks later after I left, the feds knocked the door down and took everybody, rounded up the entire Supreme team, from the top bosses down to the street sellers to the lookouts, everybody.
Right. And then that next year in 1988, that's when things got even crazier when Pappy Mason, who was affiliated with the Supreme team as well, he ordered the murder of 22-year-old rookie cop Edward Byrne.
Yeah.
And that's when things really went insane because that became a national spotlight to the point where President Bush Sr. actually carried around the badge of Officer Byrne while he was running for president. And it was basically saying, like, this is not going to happen when I'm president, like the killing of cops and everything else like that. So at that point, everything changed in Queens. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, that's spot on. That after that, vicious homicide of Officer Byrne, it changed the entire game. The war on drugs became real. The NYPD created all these TNT narcotics units. They was hitting doors all over. I was just happy to be in the military and out of that space, and having nothing to do with that because anybody and everybody that was affiliated, they was coming for them. They was coming for everybody. I was getting calls from home. I would call from the military, speak to my wife, and she was just giving me the 411. And plus, I would see it in the newspapers, even upstate New York where I was at.
Okay, so you join the military. You do around 4 years?
Yeah, 3 years and 8 months.
And then coming out, you become a cop.
Yeah. So I took the police test while I was in the military because I knew that it would take a couple of years for the background investigation. And I wanted to make sure that I had this military behind me because I knew they would say, oh, he just got out the military. The kid is clean. He's good. And you got to understand, I never was convicted of a crime. I was arrested, but I never was convicted of a crime.
Okay, so you go to the police academy, you become a cop, and then I guess there's a training video at some point, and you pop it in, and they're actually showing the Supreme team in this video with like your man Bimmy is right there and other dudes and it's all just right there, and you're having to present this with them not knowing you're actually part of this crew.
Yo, Vlad, you be doing your homework, I see. Yeah,
Right.
listen. I was a training sergeant at the time. So training sergeants pretty much train the officers. You get stuff from headquarters that comes down. You in the precinct, you got to train everybody in the precinct on this, whatever the training topic is. So I get the envelope. It's a VCR tape in there. I don't even think I read this stuff. I popped the tape in for the training, and they have a flow chart coming down, an organizational chart with Supreme on top, Bimmy, everybody. And I'm sitting there, I'm nervous, I'm sweating, I'm a sergeant in uniform, and I'm hoping that my picture don't show up on this flow chart. But what's really crazy about it, I'm looking at these cops and I'm saying, they don't even have a clue that I'm like 6 years removed from being a part of this notorious team.
Right. So by 98, you got promoted to sergeant. By 2002, you got promoted to lieutenant. So you're really working your way up, up the ladder to, really having a high-ranking position. And I guess by 2006, you were promoted to captain.
Yeah. Yeah, I went through the ranks pretty quickly. But, because, again, like my first job was working for this organization where I knew where the power was at the top. So when I come into policing, and I came out of military also, so I knew like generals was at the top. And, policing is a paramilitary organization. You want to make change, you need to rise. And so I passed those exams, sergeant, lieutenant, and captain. I passed those with flying colors and ended up becoming a commander, one of the top commanders in the city.
Right. And by 2008, you got promoted to a deputy inspector?
Yes. Which is a position that's appointed personally from the police commissioner. So Police Commissioner Ray Kelly handpicked me to become a deputy inspector.
Okay. And police commissioner, is that the very highest role in the NYPD?
Yeah, that's the very highest. He ran a department of 48,000.
48,000 officers.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So did you feel that at some point you might actually be police commissioner of NYPD?
Absolutely. I was on a trajectory to, if not be the police commissioner, I would have been like a 3-4 star chief. Just the way I was maneuvering, the connections I was making, the people was loving me. It was all working out great for me, especially now. If I still was a cop, my good friend, Mayor Eric Adams is the mayor. So I'm quite sure I would have had an illustrious position.
Okay. So here you are on this major trajectory to potentially get the top spot in the biggest police department in the country. And a situation happened at Freeport. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I was the president of this organization called NOBLE, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. I created the Long Island chapter. It's a national organization, but I created the Long Island chapter where Freeport is a part of Long Island. And so they had their first black mayor out there. So I was speaking out on issues dealing with the black and brown community, the police, shootings, kidnappings, whatever it was. It came across my table, I would speak out on it. And so the mayor had reached out to me because he was catching a lot of heat over there in Freeport. The people didn't want him. If you know Freeport is basically white on one side, black on one side. The white side is very affluent and they hold all the power in Freeport. And so he wanted me to come out and speak on his behalf about bringing in a police commissioner that's not from within the police department. So I went out there to speak, and it was a very raucous meeting. It's all online. People could see if they do Corey Pegues /Freeport. You'll see. It was a very raucous event. And I spoke out on that. And being an executive in policing and speaking out on another police department, it doesn't fare well for you. So I knew I was going to catch some heat. I didn't realize that I was going to be like blackballed for speaking out on that issue.
Right, because after speaking out, essentially against police officers in a way,
right,
your whole career changed.
Yeah, my career changed. It didn't change in the sense I got demoted or anything, but the stuff that I was doing, I was in the second most violent precinct in the city of New York, which is probably the second most pristine position in policing on a command level. I wasn't getting the perks. Like, we would do things like I would drive around millionaires that wanted to see the city. The police commissioner office would call me and say, hey, I need you to drive this millionaire around, show them, put a vest on them, show them, because they was looking to get money from these people to donate. So the little perks had stopped. It slowed down. But for me, it didn't even really matter because the way I grew up and what I had, it was like, at what point did I start speaking out on some issues that's affecting the community? I would have liked to, get promoted some more, but doing that interview, people was really upset with me.
Right, and in the documentary, they had some of your coworkers talk about it, and they were like, "Yo, what the fuck are you doing? Like, yo, what's wrong with you? You know what they say? How a reputation takes a lifetime to build and 3 seconds to ruin." It seemed like that kind of happened to you overnight, right?
Yeah, it definitely happened. It happened overnight. But for me, it didn't even really matter because I had gained so much more than I ever even thought or imagined in my life at that point. I'm definitely a product of the 3 M's, Malcolm Martin and Medgar Evers. And if they didn't speak out, I wouldn't even be able to sit on Vlad TV right now and do this interview. So I was good and comfortable in my skin. It was the other people, because a lot of people, they sucking up to people. I don't know how to suck nothing. You know what I'm saying? That's what they do. They on their knees and they're reaching. And it was like, how much am I going to get before I feel comfortable? And now I can reach back and give back to the community.
Well, in 2013, you got injured. You popped a disc in your back, and then you decided to retire. And that lasted for about a year until 2014, when you decided to go on the Combat Jack podcast. Rest in peace, by the way, Combat Jack. I knew him, for a while actually before he passed. So definitely sad news that he passed away. But you decided to go on this podcast and essentially tell your whole story, because all of these years, like your life in the Supreme team and everything else was completely secret and hidden. And now you decide to actually let all that out there. And the reaction to that was not so good when it comes to the NYPD.
There's never no good reaction with me and the NYPD. So going on with the backside of the Combat Jack is, and God bless my lawyer, Ed Woods, who you probably knew also. Ed Woods, big entertainment attorney. We was trying to get a book deal for like a year and a half. I was trying to get a book deal, couldn't get a book deal. And so Combat Jack at the time had the #1 hip hop podcast in the country. And I said, listen, if we go on Combat Jack and I jump off the roof and tell everything, I'm going to get a deal. I just didn't know that I was going to be on the front page of a New York tabloid and run a story on me for 5 days. And every national organization, all the news networks was talking about this thug cop, which they labeled me as a thug cop, which was definitely off base because I used to be a thug and then I was a cop. So I never was a thug cop at one time. But it was all good. What people don't know, the other backside to this, Vlad, is while the NYPD and all the news media, conservative media, is beating me up, I'm with my book agent. I signed with a book agent the day that the newspaper came out. A week later, I'm sitting in a room with Simon & Schuster, Random House, Doubleday, Judith Regan, the top 10 publishers in the world is bidding on my story because of that newspaper article.
Right. And that article really just kind of took on a life of its own. I guess one of your old friends, David McClary, spoke about you, claimed that you were just a con man looking for another hustle.
Yeah. So, when I was on Combat Jack, I kind of alluded to the fact that I knew one of the guys who allegedly was involved with the Ed Burns homicide. Again, I wasn't there. I had no contact with anybody. And that took a life of its own because that's why they did the story. The cop, then they reached out to him in prison and he said, I don't even know who this guy is or whatever. But I wasn't even mad at that. I mean, listen, this guy's going up for parole or whatever it is. I was just speaking. Maybe I shouldn't have talked about it. But I grew up in an area where there was gangsters, pimps, and hustlers. So I knew the most ironic thing is, again, now I knew other people who shot cops. It just so happened that situation was like taboo for police. And it's probably the most infamous police homicide in history of policing in the entire country. But I had nothing to do with it. And I was just speaking on relationships that I had growing up, and Combat Jack was asking the questions. And I alluded to the fact that I might have known, that I grew up with one of the guys that I knew. It is what it is.
Right. Well, the NYPD was so upset over this interview and over you essentially sharing these stories that I guess they tore down your portrait from the wall from the 67th precinct where he used to work. Nassau cops actually came to your house and seized 3 of your guns. Why?
Yeah.
Why were they able to actually seize your guns?
Well, listen, police is a male, white dominated force. This all this had to do with race. This whole thing with going at me had to deal with race because I had an illustrious career. Police commissioner brought me in a room to meet President Barack Obama. I got degrees. I was a commander. I was a professor at 2 different colleges. But me telling that story, they couldn't take the fact that I hid my back. And I didn't really hide it. Vlad, let's be clear on the record. Nobody asked me if I ever sold crack or if I ever knew anybody that shot somebody. I only answered the questions that they gave me. Was I supposed to volunteer information when I'm trying to change my life to become a, law-abiding citizen? Nobody ever asked me that stuff. So it's all hogwash what they're saying. But it doesn't make sense to me because to this day, as we speak, I get a pension check every single month. So they just did that to hurt my feelings. But having guns is probably the most easiest thing for me to get. I didn't need those 3 guns. I was carrying guns since I was 15 years old. It's not for me to get a gun right now after this interview to go get a gun. Guns is the easiest thing to get in America. So they didn't hurt me. They just took my legal guns away, which I never even carried a gun when I was a cop off duty. I never carried a gun off duty because I carried guns when I was in the streets, and guns create problems.
Well, along with all this, the NYPD actually tried to strip your pension, which I guess you're making $135,000 a year tax-free. And they actually tried to strip this pension from you, which I assume they didn't succeed.
No, that's a little low, but they didn't succeed. And you got to understand, in the history of the NYPD, they have never taken anyone's pension, ever. Because the only way you could take somebody's pension is go to a court of law, speak to the judge, and tell the judge why you want to take the pension. So they would have had to go into a courtroom and said, we promoted him all the way through the ranks. He was a commander. He was illustrious. And when he retired, he told his story. When he was 15 years old to 18 years old, he sold drugs and carried guns. And the judge would be like, get the fuck out of my office. It doesn't make sense. So you look at this, it doesn't make, but it's, Vlad, there's people today that think I don't have a pension. People walk up to me like, yo, I'm sorry they took my pension. But I'm saying, nah, I've been retired 9 years. They gave me over $1 million. So we doing good over here. So NYPD, Thank you for the publicity. You gave me a couple of deals, got a documentary book deal. You forgot about my book, Once a Cop. Yes.
Right. Right. Once a Cop that came before the documentary.
Yes. So while the NYPD and cops are steady talking about me, I'm just building legacy for my family and working hard. And I already put them in my back rearview mirror. I don't even think about them, but they constantly thinking about me. They need to get over it. It's over.
You said what you said about the NYPD while you were still there, but after you left, you became more outspoken. You spoke out against Eric Gardner and what happened when he died. And then, of course, the whole George Floyd situation happened some years later. When you look at the relationships between police and the communities that they do supposed to protect and serve, you have the blue wall of silence, you have Blue Lives Matter. You see what I'm saying? You have a lot of things. For example, Tupac, felt that the NYPD was the biggest gang in the country. And they operate in a similar fashion. If someone's gang, homie gets killed, they go out and get revenge. The police will do the same thing in their own way, sometimes in the same way. So when you look at what's happening right now between the police and the communities, is it about the same or has it gotten better or worse?
Well, it's probably about the same. So you got to understand, policing start with slave patrols. So until you take an atomic bomb and get rid of this whole policing the way we see it now, it needs to be restructured, reimagined. It needs to be something different because you understand history, traditions are passed down. They keep being passed down, passed down, passed down. Policing is all about leadership. So if the leadership ain't buying into protecting and serving, instead of, I always say in black and brown communities, the police hunt, and in non-minority communities, they protect and serve. Until they start protecting and serving everywhere, it's never going to change. In the past 2 years have really put a light on policing, and policing feelings are hurt right now. But they can get over it because they had like a 30-year run of everybody loving the police, throwing parades and parties for police. And George Floyd got murdered, and everybody's putting a lot of pressure on police to change and treat the community, minority communities with respect. So until they do that, we're going to keep having this friction.
Right. And you actually believe in body cameras. You think that all cops should have them.
Yeah, I think we believe in I totally believe in body cameras, but I believe more in respect because, Vlad, we could Google right now body camera footage of police shooting somebody. Everybody getting shot with a body camera on. The cops still shooting people and killing people with body cameras. So body cameras are not the end-all be-all. So I don't want people to get twisted saying, give them a body camera. We watch everybody get killed with body cameras. What are we going to do different? The difference is they have to have strict accountability. These cops, if they make these vital mistakes, not really mistakes, it's two ways you can make a mistake. Mistake of the heart, mistake of the mind. George Floyd, in my estimation, that was a mistake of the mind, and he should go to prison for that. Eric Garner, there's no way that they should have choked the life out of this guy. And all of this stuff is on video. So be clear, Vlad, with video, it's not the end-all be-all. Because we see him and people get off. Eric Garner was on video and nobody went to jail. George Floyd was a whole different animal. So let's not get stuck on body cameras and thinking that's going to be the end-all be-all, was going to save policing. No, policing needs to be restructured, reimagined, and it has to be strict accountability.
Okay. And why do you think the cop got off for choking Eric Garner to death? And it was on video.
Oh, well, clearly the cop got off. His name is Politano, something like that. Whatever his name was. He got off because he got murdered in Staten Island. Staten Island is a staunch conservative area in New York City, and no police officers getting convicted of a crime in Staten Island. That same choking would have happened in Brooklyn, Queens, or Lower Manhattan. The cops would have been in jail. That was clear. They didn't even want to bring it to a grand jury.
Well, recently, the New York mayor, Eric Adams, who you said that he said some things about drill music in New York and actually even asked for it to get pulled off the airwaves. Later on, he actually met with a bunch of the artists and they had a discussion about that. I mean, as someone who, was on the NYPD, but is also kind of grew up in hip hop and is familiar with the music and everything else like that. What are your thoughts on something like this?
Well, my thoughts on the drill music and the mayor speaking out on that. Listen, it's freedom of speech. You can't muzzle freedom of speech. These people are, they're rapping. Most of them are rapping about their lives, even though some of them are saying we're gonna shoot somebody and kill somebody. That's their life. But that's policing has to fix that. Not the mayor can't fix that. Policing should be identifying gang members. It's not rocket science for policing right now, but it's easy. You gather information, you analyze it, and you deploy personnel to the hot spots. It's so simple right now. It's not rocket science to figure out who's committing crimes. So if the police really want to bring crime down, they'll go after those gangbangers. They'll go after the murders. It's easy. You have a list. Who's getting out of prison? Somebody got shot over here. There was a rape. All right, let's look at the last 6 months. Who got out of jail for rape? Who's our known rapist? What's their background? Oh, Corey just got out. He's on parole. Let's put a tail on him. He might be doing. It's not rocket science. So if the police want to really bring crime down, they have the information.
Well, especially these days with social media.
NYPD got a whole social media team that you have cops sitting in a room all day. That's what they get paid for. They're on the computer looking at every single tweet, every single Instagram post that this person, that a criminal, these known criminals are doing. And that's how they tag people and put cases together now. I think in the next 20 years, there's going to be no cops on the street. All the crime's going to be solved in the back room because everybody puts everything on social media.
Really? How big is the social media team with the NYPD?
Don't get me, I don't want to give you false numbers, but it's pretty big. This is what it is now. This is what it is.
Crazy. Well, Corey Pegues, I appreciate you coming in and sharing your story. A very unique story. We've had criminals, we've had cops, but we've never really had someone that really intersected the two the way you have. And it also shows kind of how you turn your life around because, when you watch documentary and you saw your friends, you could tell that a lot of them had really hard lives. From prison to drug addiction to crime and so forth. And the fact that you actually went from this background to getting to nearly the highest levels of the NYPD really just kind of shows the type of person you are and how you can change your life around. And I'm not saying that everyone should be a cop. I mean, it's never been my dream, but it is a legitimate job. And it was definitely a better route than what you were taking before.
Like I always say, Blythe, listen, I love good cops, all right? There's some bad cops, bad doctors, bad lawyers, but policing is a profession that we need in America. We do know that. You can't police yourself. But we need good police officers. Are some going to make a mistake? Yes. But, it has to be the exception, not the norm.
I agree. Well, Corey Pegues, appreciate you coming in. Wish you all the best. And, looking forward to see what other projects you got coming up.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate you.
No doubt.
All right.
Peace.
Peace.